The first time the world heard about the tragedy that struck the Reiner family, no one could believe it. Rob Reiner, the iconic filmmaker, the man behind some of Hollywood's most beloved movies, was gone. And not just him. His wife Michelle, his partner of decades, his confidant, his family's anchor, was also gone. Both had been violently taken from this world, victims of multiple sharp force injuries. Stabbed, right in the sanctuary of their $13.5 million Brentwood home. The place that should have been a safe haven. The place that should have been untouchable. And yet, it became the stage for one of the most shocking family tragedies in recent Hollywood memory. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. The story is more than just a crime. It's a portrait of betrayal, secrecy, and explosive family dynamics. A story that cuts through the veneer of Hollywood glamour to expose raw, human emotions at their most extreme. Fear, anger, jealousy, and grief. But it doesn't stop there. In the days and weeks following the murders, the narrative took twists that no one could have predicted. Nick Reiner, the couple's son, was arrested, facing charges that rocked the media and the public alike. And then, in a courtroom filled with tension, tears, and accusations, a new layer of horror emerged. Tracy Reiner, Rob and Michelle's daughter, broke down in a moment of public anguish. Her tears, raw and uncontrollable, became a focal point for speculation. But it was Romy Reiner, the youngest daughter, who delivered a declaration that would stun the world. She killed my mom and dad. The implication was clear. Romy accused her own sister. Her own blood. Think about that for a moment. In any family, in any circumstance, accusing a sibling of orchestrating the deaths of your parents would be unthinkable. It's something most people couldn't even imagine saying aloud. But Romy said it, and she said it under oath, in a courtroom where the world was watching, listening, and trying to make sense of a situation that seemed impossible to comprehend. And that's just the beginning. You might be wondering, how did it come to this? How does a family known for its Hollywood pedigree, for its outward appearances of success, happiness, and stability, descend into chaos and tragedy? What was hidden behind the glamorous photo ops, the smiling faces at premieres, and the carefully curated public image? The answer is far more complicated and far more shocking than anyone could have guessed. To understand, we need to go back, not just to the night of the murders, but to the years, the tensions, the conflicts, and the moments that were invisible to the public eye. The Reiners were, like many families, not immune to the complexities of human relationships, sibling rivalries, disagreements over money, differences in lifestyle, choices that may have seemed minor at the time but festered into resentment. For decades, beneath the polished Hollywood exterior, a storm was quietly building. Imagine walking into the Brentwood estate that night, the air heavy with the scent of expensive furniture, carefully maintained gardens, and a sense of security. The lights are dim, the atmosphere serene. This is a home, a sanctuary. And yet, in one horrifying moment, it became a crime scene. Emergency responders arrived to find a tableau that no one should ever have to witness. The details are gruesome. But beyond the physical horror, it's the human aspect, the shock, the disbelief, the betrayal, that lingers far longer. Then there's the courtroom. The tension there is palpable. Tracy Reiner, the daughter everyone thought they knew, sits on the stand, visibly shaken. Her voice breaks as she recounts events, the courtroom hanging on every word. And Romy? She delivers her accusations with a clarity and conviction that chills even the most seasoned reporters. She killed my mom and dad, Romy says. These aren't just words. They are a declaration that changes the narrative entirely. Suddenly, what seemed like a tragedy involving one person becomes a story of alleged betrayal, lies, and dark secrets buried deep within the family. For viewers, for the public, for anyone trying to make sense of it, the natural question arises. Who can you trust? When someone as close as a sibling is accused of unimaginable acts, the world feels less certain. The black and white rules of morality, of family loyalty, suddenly blur. And that's exactly what makes this story compelling. Not just the crime, but the psychological, emotional, and interpersonal layers that accompany it. And yet, the story is far from complete. While Romy's allegations are explosive, they raise more questions than answers. What evidence supports her claim? How does Tracy defend herself? How did Nick's alleged actions intersect with these accusations? And what role did family dynamics, old grievances, and hidden resentments play in this tragedy? Every answer only seems to lead to more questions, more twists, more suspense. In this video, we will go chapter by chapter into the Reiner family's life before and after the tragedy, peeling back the layers of secrecy, examining the courtroom drama, and exposing the shocking moments that no one saw coming. From childhood dynamics to financial disputes, from public personas to private conflicts, we will explore it all. You'll see how jealousy, resentment, and secrets festered quietly over time, ultimately culminating in a night that changed everything. But here's the thing. Even as we dive into these details, one question looms larger than all others. Who is telling the truth? When families fracture, when allegations fly, the line between reality and perception becomes razor thin. And in this case, with millions watching, with lives forever altered, the stakes could not be higher. By the end of this video, you will not only understand the shocking events that unfolded in the Reiner household, but you'll also grasp the complex emotional and psychological forces that shaped the tragedy. You'll confront uncomfortable questions about trust, loyalty, and the dark side of family dynamics. And you'll be left pondering one chilling thought. Could this happen in any family, hidden behind the walls of normalcy and everyday life? They look like the perfect Hollywood family. Picture it. The camera flashes, premieres, award shows, and the kind of smiles that made you think everything was flawless. Rob Reiner, a titan in the film industry, known for classics like This Is Spinal Tap and A Few Good Men, always carried himself with a charisma that made you trust him instantly. His wife Michelle, graceful, warm, a mother who seemed to have the patience of a saint, complemented him perfectly. Together, they were the embodiment of Hollywood success and family stability. A power couple admired by millions. But as history and tragedy has shown, appearances can be devastatingly deceiving. Behind closed doors, the Reiner family, like so many others, wrestled with human complexities that no publicist could spin into a perfect narrative. Their 3 children, Nick, Tracy, and Romy, grew up surrounded by privilege, yet not immune to the pressures and strains of family life. There were expectations, unspoken comparisons, and a subtle but persistent tension that had been simmering for years. Nick, the eldest, had always been under scrutiny, with his lifestyle choices and behavior attracting attention, both internally and from those on the outside. Tracy, the middle child, carried the weight of responsibility in subtle ways, always striving to be the stabilizing figure, yet sometimes losing herself in the process. Romy, the youngest, was observant, quiet in her youth, but increasingly aware of the fissures forming between her siblings. The cracks were there, even if no one noticed them. There were moments, small but telling, that hinted at the underlying tension, heated disagreements about money, arguments over perceived favoritism, even private grievances that never saw the light of day. In families, as in the best films, character flaws and past mistakes often converge at the worst possible time. The Reiner's story, tragically, was about to reach such a point. To understand the tragedy that would later unfold, we need to delve into the family's dynamics. Rob, despite his public persona of warmth and wit, was a man who valued order and accountability. He noticed patterns in his children's behavior, sometimes expressing disappointment in ways that left a mark, even if he thought they were subtle. Financial matters, lifestyle choices, and personal responsibility became points of contention, not in isolation but in a web of ongoing judgments and reactions. The result was a family living in a kind of quiet tension, where love existed alongside resentment, and loyalty intertwined with frustration. Tracy, the middle child, seemed to embody the duality of care and control. On one hand, she was fiercely loyal to her parents, involved in their lives, protective in ways only a daughter could be. On the other hand, her own ambitions, frustrations, and judgments sometimes collided with her siblings' independence. Romy, growing up in the shadow of Tracy's assertiveness and Nick's unpredictability, began to perceive disparities in behavior and treatment that she would later articulate in ways that shocked everyone. As they reached adulthood, the differences among the siblings became more pronounced. Nick, despite the love of his family, struggled to align with expectations, choosing paths that clashed with his father's principles. Tracy, perhaps unwittingly, sometimes acted as the enforcer of family rules, exacerbating tensions with Nick. Romy observed, recording each slight, each conversation, each hidden argument, sometimes feeling powerless, sometimes silently judging. These moments, trivial at first, became the seeds of suspicion, mistrust, and ultimately, heartbreak. Yet outwardly, the Reiners maintained a facade of unity. Family dinners, holidays, celebrations, all captured in photographs that exuded happiness. Guests would leave the home believing in the harmony of the family, never guessing that beneath the surface, conversations could turn tense, and emotions ran deep and conflicted. This duality, public perfection and private struggle, is common in families, yet rarely does it culminate in something as catastrophic as what the Reiners experienced. Imagine the home itself. The Brentwood estate, a sprawling mansion of immense beauty and elegance, symbolized success and comfort. But within those walls, the ordinary struggles of parent-child relationships, sibling rivalries, and unresolved grievances festered like a storm behind the curtains. Children who once played in sunlit gardens grew up navigating emotional minefields, learning to conceal feelings while managing expectations. It was in this environment, paradoxically luxurious and emotionally complex, that the seeds of tragedy were sown. Financial disputes, often dismissed as minor squabbles, carried weight. Who controlled the estate? How were resources allocated? What responsibilities did each child have? Each question, each disagreement, became a thread in a tapestry of tension that no one outside the family could fully comprehend. And then there was the psychology of perception. In many families, the middle child often occupies a unique role. Neither the adored firstborn nor the indulged youngest, the middle child is tasked with negotiation, with balance. Tracy, positioned in this role, sometimes struggled between her allegiance to her parents and her relationships with her siblings. Romy, observant and increasingly independent, began to question actions, motives, and decisions. And Nick, at the center of familial scrutiny, reacted in ways that occasionally escalated conflict. The interplay of these personalities, under the pressure of wealth, fame, and expectation, created a volatile dynamic. By the time the events that would lead to murder unfolded, this family had been navigating a minefield for years, often without realizing the danger beneath their feet. The combination of personality clashes, old resentments, and miscommunication created conditions ripe for explosive outcomes. Add in fame, public scrutiny, and the inherent stress of a Hollywood lifestyle, and the Reiners' private conflicts were magnified, making the tragedy that followed almost, in hindsight, inevitable. But even with all this context, nothing prepares the world or the audience for the shock of a family member being accused of murdering the very people they swore to protect. Romy's accusation, leveled at her own sister, shattered the final veneer of normalcy. And as we will see in subsequent chapters, the events of that night, the legal battles, and the courtroom revelations are even more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. So, as we peer into the Reiners' world, it's essential to remember that this is not just a story of crime. It's a story of human emotion at its extremes. Love, loyalty, resentment, and suspicion collide in ways that can devastate families. And sometimes, the people we think we know best, the people we trust implicitly, can surprise us in the most horrifying ways. What happens when the family you believe in the most begins to unravel before your eyes? How does betrayal manifest when it is closest to home? And perhaps the most chilling question of all, could you recognize the signs before it's too late? It was supposed to be just another quiet night at the Brentwood estate. The kind of evening that wealthy families like the Reiners often take for granted. Luxury surrounding them, security systems in place, the soft glow of lights against manicured lawns, and a sense of safety that only a home like theirs can provide. But on that Sunday night, everything changed. In the span of hours, the Reiner family went from living what appeared to be a picture-perfect existence to becoming the center of a shocking, unspeakable tragedy. The details of that evening are both chilling and surreal. According to reports from the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office, Rob Reiner, 78, and Michelle, 70, suffered multiple sharp force injuries. The nature of their wounds indicated not just a sudden attack, but a deliberate, violent assault. Something horrifying and calculated. Both were found in their home, a place that should have been impenetrable to danger, and the scene painted a grim picture that no one could have anticipated. For a family of their stature, wealth, and fame, the idea of such violence taking place inside their own home seemed unimaginable. And yet, it happened. The sequence of events leading up to the murders remains a combination of fact, speculation, and witness testimony. What is known is that Nick Reiner, the 32-year-old son, lived in the guest house on the estate. Security footage and witness reports indicate that he was present on the property that night. But questions quickly arose. What prompted the attack? Was there a confrontation? Had tensions within the family escalated to a point that none of the Reiners, or anyone outside the family, could foresee? Neighbors reported hearing nothing unusual, no screams, no signs of struggle audible beyond the mansion's walls. The quiet suburban street, lined with expensive homes and manicured gardens, was a stark contrast to the horror that had unfolded inside one of its residences. It is in this juxtaposition, the serene exterior and the violent interior, that the story becomes particularly unsettling. How could such a tragedy go unnoticed until it was too late? How could a family, seemingly close and cohesive, erupt into such deadly conflict? When authorities arrived, the gravity of the scene became immediately apparent. Rob and Michelle were pronounced dead at the property, and the initial response quickly turned into a criminal investigation of the highest profile. Within hours, Nick Reiner was arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder. The news spread like wildfire. Headlines flashed across television screens, social media feeds exploded with speculation, and the public grappled with the shocking notion that a son could be involved in the deaths of his parents. And yet, even amid this chaos, another narrative began to emerge. The family, already fractured, was under scrutiny not just for the murders themselves, but for the tensions and rivalries that may have contributed to them. Tracy Reiner, the elder daughter, would later break down in court, her tears a mixture of grief, fear, and perhaps guilt. Romy, the youngest, shocked observers when she accused Tracy directly of being complicit. The allegations were explosive, transforming a story of one son's alleged crime into a tangled web of family betrayal and suspicion. But before diving into the courtroom drama, it's critical to understand the emotional landscape of that night. Imagine being a witness to the immediate aftermath. Paramedics rushing in, flashing lights illuminating the estate, police tape cordoning off the scene. For anyone, even seasoned first responders, the sight of a family, so publicly admired, torn apart in such a brutal way, is almost unbearable. And yet, even in this moment of chaos, the seeds of the narrative that would dominate headlines for months were already being planted. Family dynamics played a central role in how the night unfolded. Reports suggest that there had been arguments in the days leading up to the murders. Nick's behavior, financial decisions, and personal choices had allegedly created friction with his father. While it remains unclear exactly what conversations took place that night, sources indicate that tensions had been simmering for some time. In families like the Reiners, where personal and professional lives intersect under the spotlight of fame, conflicts can escalate quickly, often in private spaces where no one else can intervene. The complexity of the situation is compounded by the presence of multiple family members in different locations around the estate. Nick in the guest house, Tracy and Romy elsewhere. Each individual's perspective, movements, and interactions would become central to understanding not just the night of the murders, but the psychological and emotional buildup that preceded it. And in cases like this, where emotions run high, facts become entangled with perception, creating a narrative that is as difficult to untangle as it is shocking. Witness statements, security footage, and initial police reports began to paint a picture of confusion, fear, and chaos. Yet amidst this, the public remained captivated not just by the crime, but by the personalities involved. Rob Reiner was a public figure whose life and career were familiar to millions. Michelle Reiner was admired for her grace, intelligence, and the role she played in supporting her family. The combination of fame, wealth, and tragedy ensured that every detail would be scrutinized, analyzed, and sensationalized. Then there's the human element, what it means for a family to endure such a night. The shock, grief, and disbelief that Tracy and Romy must have experienced, walking into a reality where their parents were violently taken from them, is almost unimaginable. How does one process that? How do siblings navigate a sudden and horrific loss when questions about motive and complicity hang heavy in the air? These are not just legal or journalistic questions. They are deeply human ones, questions that touch on trust, loyalty, and the fragile nature of familial bonds. And it was during this period of grief and confusion that Romy Reiner made the statement that would electrify the courtroom and the media alike. "She killed my mom and dad." Her words cast suspicion not only on the events of that night, but on the relationships and tensions that had built over years. They introduced a new layer of complexity, one that suggested that the tragedy was not just the result of one individual's actions, but potentially of multiple, hidden dynamics within the family itself. By the end of the night, the narrative had shifted from a shocking murder to a multifaceted story of betrayal, grief, and accusation. Authorities were left piecing together events. The family was left reeling, and the public was left questioning how a family that seemed so close, so carefully curated for public consumption, could harbor such deep divisions. This night, so full of horror and confusion, was only the beginning. The court proceedings, the allegations, and the unraveling of family secrets would reveal details that no one could have predicted, transforming the Reiner family tragedy from a shocking crime into a gripping, emotionally charged saga. The courtroom was silent, but the tension was palpable. Cameras clicked, scribes furiously took notes, and the air seemed thick with anticipation. Everyone in the room knew that what was about to happen would define the narrative of the Reiner family tragedy for years to come. And then she entered, Tracy Reiner, the middle child, the daughter many thought they knew. The daughter who had, until that moment, been seen as composed, measured, the one who could hold her family together. But as Tracy took her seat on the witness stand, something shifted. The air changed. There was a tremor in her hands, a quiver in her voice. The composed mask that she had carried so carefully for years began to crack. Her eyes, red-rimmed and glossy, darted around the room, not with defiance, not with calculation, but with raw, unfiltered anguish. And in that instant, the courtroom bore witness to something deeply human, grief in its purest, most vulnerable form. It started with small details, her voice breaking on the word mom, a pause too long before she could say dad. Short, choppy sentences that betrayed the calm she tried to maintain. And then the tears came, uncontrollable, unstoppable. She buried her face in her hands, a desperate attempt to compose herself. But the reality of the moment was inescapable. Every eye in the courtroom was drawn to her. Reporters, lawyers, family members, even strangers on live feeds around the world were captivated, not by the spectacle, but by the devastating honesty of human emotion laid bare. The questions directed at her were straightforward, clinical even, but the answers were anything but. Each question unearthed layers of family tension, of unspoken grievances, of memories that were suddenly suffused with pain and anger. Tracy spoke of her parents with love, reverence, and sorrow, but she also revealed cracks in the family structure, hints of disputes and conflicts that had quietly built over the years. Every word was weighted, every pause pregnant with meaning, and the audience, both in the courtroom and watching globally, sensed that this was more than a testimony. It was a confession of a fractured family. And then came the moment that would shock everyone. Romy, sitting silently nearby, finally spoke. Her words cut through the courtroom like a knife. "She killed my mom and dad." The declaration was simple, devastating, and immediate in its impact. Tracy, already vulnerable, froze. Her tear-streaked face hardened for a brief moment, a flash of disbelief, fear, and perhaps indignation crossing her features. The courtroom collectively held its breath. Everyone instinctively knew that nothing would ever be the same. For those outside the courtroom, it was hard to comprehend. A daughter accusing another daughter of complicity in the murder of their parents? It sounded like something out of a noir thriller, a story invented by Hollywood writers. But this was real, raw, and devastatingly true. And the implications were enormous. If Romy's allegations held weight, then the narrative of the murders, already shocking, shifted dramatically from a story of one son's alleged crime to a tale of deep, familial betrayal and hidden motives. Tracy attempted to respond, her voice shaking but defiant. She denied any involvement, any knowledge beyond what authorities had already disclosed. Yet the emotional toll was evident. Each word she spoke seemed to push her deeper into her own turmoil. Her grief was interwoven with fear, with anger, with the realization that her own sister had turned against her in the most public way possible. It was an emotional crucible, one that would leave a lasting imprint not just on the case, but on the public's perception of the Reiner family. Court observers described the scene as surreal. Lawyers whispered, cameras recorded, and journalists scribbled furiously, but everyone present could feel the gravity of what was happening. This was more than testimony. It was the unraveling of a family's private life in front of the world. The tension was so thick it could be sliced with a knife. Even the judge, a figure typically composed and authoritative, leaned forward, visibly acknowledging the intensity of the moment. The breakdown was not just emotional, it was symbolic. Tracy's tears, her faltering words, her visible struggle to maintain composure, represented the weight of grief, guilt, fear, and public scrutiny converging simultaneously. It was a moment that humanized her in ways that public appearances never could, yet also complicated the story. To some, her breakdown elicited sympathy, a recognition of human vulnerability in the face of unimaginable tragedy. To others, it raised questions. Was this raw grief, or was there more to the story? Was it a calculated response to Romy's accusations, or the unfiltered reaction of someone caught in a nightmare beyond comprehension? What made the scene even more gripping were the contradictions emerging in real time. Tracy spoke of her love and devotion to her parents, yet Romy's words suggested deception, collusion, and betrayal. Witnesses recounted interactions between the sisters that hinted at past conflicts, subtle power struggles, and simmering resentment. What had been invisible to outsiders for years was now emerging in vivid detail, with every statement, pause, and gesture dissected for meaning. And then came the human element that no report could fully capture, the tension between sibling loyalty and the need for truth. Romy, the youngest, seemed to carry the weight of moral imperative. She claimed her words were not born out of malice, but out of the need to expose reality, to confront what she perceived as lies and betrayal. Tracy, on the other hand, embodied the struggle of defending oneself while navigating grief and public judgment. Each movement, each word, each tear carried significance far beyond the courtroom walls. By the end of the day, the public was left with more questions than answers. What exactly happened that night? Who was telling the truth, and who was hiding something? Could siblings truly betray each other in such a devastating manner? And perhaps most hauntingly, how well can we ever truly know the people closest to us? The courtroom drama had begun, but it was only the opening act. Tracy's breakdown, Romy's accusations, and the visible fracture within the family had set the stage for months of legal battles, media scrutiny, and public fascination. Every subsequent revelation, every piece of evidence, would now be viewed through the lens of this emotional confrontation. The courtroom was tense, a place where silence itself seemed to carry the weight of impending revelation. Everyone in attendance, reporters, lawyers, family members, even the judge, knew something monumental was about to happen. And then Romy Reiner, the youngest daughter, took the stand. Quiet, composed, and observant, she carried an aura of calm that belied the storm she was about to unleash. For years, she had watched her family navigate conflicts behind closed doors, absorbing every word, every gesture, every subtle shift in tone. That night, under oath, she began to speak. Her voice was steady, almost eerily so, as she recounted details that many in the courtroom, and millions watching from home, could scarcely believe. She spoke of the tensions between her siblings, the arguments that had escalated over years, and the hidden resentments that no one outside the family had noticed. Each anecdote, each observation, was a building block, laying the foundation for the explosive allegation she was about to make. And then it came. Simple, direct, chilling. Tracy killed my mom and dad. The room seemed to stop breathing. Lawyers froze mid-note. Cameras clicked incessantly, and the judge's gavel hovered in hesitation. Tracy, sitting just a few feet away, visibly recoiled. Her composure shattered further, a mix of fear, disbelief, and outrage flashing across her face. The statement wasn't just a claim. It was a seismic accusation that shifted the entire narrative of the Reiner family tragedy. Suddenly, the story was no longer only about Nick Reiner's alleged involvement. It became a story of sibling betrayal, deceit, and hidden motives that had festered for years. Romy continued, providing context that was both shocking and meticulously detailed. She described confrontations she had witnessed, arguments she had overheard, and behaviors that, in hindsight, appeared suspicious. Her observations weren't mere speculation. They were grounded in incidents, moments that others had dismissed or overlooked. It was as if she had been quietly gathering a case against Tracy for years, and now, finally, she had the platform to expose it. Her tone was calm but unwavering. There was no hysteria, no dramatics. Just a measured delivery of what she believed to be the truth. And that, perhaps, made it all the more terrifying. The confidence with which she spoke lent credibility to her words, making even the most skeptical listeners pause and reconsider what they thought they knew about the family dynamics. The courtroom, of course, erupted in reaction. Questions flew from lawyers, both defense and prosecution, seeking clarification, context, and evidence. Romy detailed moments of conflict that painted Tracy in a new light, moments that suggested manipulation, deceit, and a willingness to harm the very people who had raised her. Witnesses corroborated some of her claims, while others offered contradictory accounts, deepening the mystery and tension. Each response added another layer to the unfolding drama, a puzzle that was as emotionally complex as it was legally challenging. What made Romy's testimony so compelling and terrifying was the combination of personal experience and moral conviction. She spoke not out of vengeance or bitterness, but from a perceived duty to the truth. She claimed that while she loved her sister, the gravity of the situation demanded honesty, even if it destroyed public perceptions of the family. This duality, love and accusation, created a tension that rippled through the courtroom, leaving everyone in a state of disbelief and anticipation. Beyond the legal implications, Romy's words struck at the very heart of what it means to trust and protect one's family. How could one sibling betray another so completely? How could the very person who shared childhood memories, holidays, and milestones be implicated in the murder of the parents who nurtured them? These questions weren't just theoretical. They were deeply personal, and they resonated with everyone watching. And yet, Romy's revelations also raised critical legal questions. What evidence existed to support her claims? Were these observations sufficient to implicate Tracy, or were they simply interpretations of complex family interactions? How would the court weigh emotional testimony against forensic facts, witness accounts, and the broader context of the case? Every answer seemed to lead to more questions, each one thickening the plot and deepening the audience's engagement. As Romy laid out her account, she also illuminated the broader dynamics within the Reiner family. She highlighted patterns of behavior, conflicts over money, disagreements about lifestyle, and subtle manipulations that had gone unnoticed for years. These were not isolated incidents, but a tapestry of interactions that, when viewed together, suggested a chilling possibility. That the tragedy was not simply the result of one son's alleged actions, but of a cascade of dysfunction, mistrust, and hidden agendas within the family itself. The emotional impact was undeniable. Tracy's tears, Romy's composure, and the courtroom's charged atmosphere created a narrative that felt almost cinematic in its intensity. It was a story of love and betrayal, of loyalty tested to its limits, and of family bonds stretched to the breaking point. Every observer, whether a juror, reporter, or viewer at home, was drawn deeper into the unfolding drama, compelled to ask themselves what they would do in a similar situation, what choices they might make under extreme pressure, and who, if anyone, could be trusted. By the end of her testimony, Romy had done more than just accuse her sister. She had reframed the tragedy entirely, shifting public perception, influencing legal strategy, and forcing the world to confront uncomfortable truths about family, loyalty, and morality. What had started as a story of a son's alleged crime had now become a multifaceted narrative of betrayal, suspicion, and psychological complexity. But even as Romy stepped down from the stand, the tension remained. Questions lingered in every mind. Was Tracy truly involved? Could Romy be mistaken? Or worse, misleading? What evidence had yet to be revealed? The courtroom, and the public beyond it, knew that the revelations were far from over. Every family has secrets. Some are small, harmless, almost amusing in hindsight, forgotten birthday gifts, hidden snacks, unspoken rivalries. Others are darker, buried deep beneath the surface, festering quietly until circumstances conspire to expose them. The Reiner family, as the world would soon learn, had both. And it was those hidden truths, the things whispered behind closed doors and never discussed in public, that would ultimately shape the tragedy that unfolded. To understand the full magnitude of what happened, one must look beyond the headlines and the courtroom drama. Rob and Michelle Reiner were pillars of Hollywood, yes, but they were also parents navigating the complexities of raising children with strong personalities in the glare of fame. Each child had a role in the family's ecosystem, but those roles were far from fixed or simple. Nick, the eldest, carried the weight of expectations. Tracy, the middle child, was both caretaker and critic. Romy, the youngest, was observant, often silent, but never naive. Together, they created a dynamic that, beneath the surface, was volatile, complex, and, ultimately, combustible. The perfect family image that appeared in magazines and on social media was meticulously maintained, but like any polished exterior, it hid imperfections. There were whispered arguments about money, property, and lifestyle choices. Subtle disputes that, to outsiders, seemed trivial, were emotionally charged in ways that only insiders could feel. A disagreement over how to manage the estate could evolve into long-standing resentment. A seemingly casual comment could ignite jealousy or frustration. Every interaction carried weight, amplified by years of unspoken grievances. Tracy, in particular, had a complicated relationship with these secrets. On the surface, she appeared devoted to her parents, responsible, and concerned about the well-being of the family. But behind closed doors, tensions simmered. She was often caught between enforcing her parents' rules and managing her siblings' behavior. A role that put her in a position of authority and, simultaneously, vulnerability. Romy noticed these dynamics. She saw moments of favoritism, subtle power plays, and arguments that left lasting impressions. Over time, these observations shaped her perspective on the family, her trust in her sister, and ultimately her accusations in court. Nick's role cannot be understated. His behavior, choices, and conflicts with his father created an undercurrent of tension that affected everyone in the household. There were disagreements about responsibility, lifestyle, and finances, issues that might have seemed minor in isolation, but, cumulatively, became points of contention. His presence in the guest house during the fateful night was not just a coincidence. It was a reflection of a family whose dynamics were constantly in flux, where lines between affection, resentment, and obligation blurred. The Reiner household was also a place where emotions ran high. Heated debates, disagreements that lasted hours, and private conflicts that never reached public view all contributed to a climate of tension. Some of these disputes involved money, who had control over certain assets, who contributed financially, and who held influence in family decisions. Others involved behavior and lifestyle choices, decisions that, in the eyes of some family members, reflected irresponsibility, disrespect, or disloyalty. Each incident, each argument, added another layer to the complex psychological environment in which the family operated. It is important to recognize that these secrets were not inherently malicious. Many were born out of human complexity. The desire to protect, the instinct to control, or the struggle to reconcile differing values and expectations. But when combined with grief, stress, and familial tension, these hidden truths created conditions ripe for misunderstanding, suspicion, and, ultimately, tragedy. The night of the murders had roots in these long-standing issues. Small disputes that had accumulated over years, subtle resentments that had been ignored, and unspoken suspicions all contributed to a charged emotional atmosphere. When tragedy struck, these hidden dynamics came to the forefront, coloring perceptions and influencing testimonies in ways that would shock observers. Romy's accusations against Tracy, for instance, were not just spontaneous. They were informed by years of witnessing these interactions, by understanding the hidden currents that ran beneath the family's polished exterior. But what made these secrets particularly dangerous was their invisibility. Outsiders, including friends, neighbors, and even the media, had no way of knowing what transpired behind the estate's closed doors. To the public, the Reiners were a picture of success, family cohesion, and warmth. No one could see the arguments over money, the quiet resentment over perceived slights, or the private confrontations that left emotional scars. And when the violent tragedy occurred, it exposed these secrets in the most horrifying way imaginable. Psychologists who study family dynamics often note that long-suppressed conflicts, combined with high-pressure environments, can lead to explosive outcomes. In the case of the Reiners, the combination of fame, wealth, and deeply rooted familial tension created a perfect storm. Each family member's choices, each word spoken or withheld, contributed to a trajectory that culminated in catastrophe. It was a tragic reminder that appearances, no matter how carefully curated, can be deceiving. The secrets behind closed doors extended beyond financial or behavioral disputes. They touched on deeper psychological elements: jealousy, rivalry, perception of favoritism, and the struggle for identity within a high-profile family. Tracy's role as both caretaker and enforcer, Romy's observant and questioning nature, and Nick's defiance and unpredictability created an intricate web of relationships that could be easily misinterpreted or weaponized when tensions reached a breaking point. By examining these hidden layers, it becomes clear why Romy's accusations were so shocking yet, in a twisted way, so believable. She had lived through the patterns, witnessed the disputes, and understood the motivations that drove her siblings. Her testimony was not simply a spontaneous outburst. It was the culmination of years of observation, interpretation, and emotional processing. It revealed that, beneath the veneer of Hollywood perfection, the Reiner family had dynamics that were far more complex and fraught than anyone could have imagined. And yet, even with all this context, the full scope of the tragedy, and the legal, emotional, and public consequences, was still unfolding. These secrets, once hidden behind closed doors, were now part of a larger narrative that would captivate the world. Every revelation, every testimony, every contradiction added tension, suspense, and drama to an already shocking story. The Reiner story, like any compelling drama, hinges on the intersection of love, loyalty, and betrayal. Families are complicated, and when private grievances, hidden resentments, and long-standing conflicts intersect with tragedy, the results can be devastating. The secrets behind closed doors not only shaped the events leading up to the murders, but they also shaped the narrative that would dominate media coverage, court proceedings, and public discourse for months to come. And as the courtroom drama continued, it became clear that these secrets were only the beginning. What would be revealed next, testimonies, evidence, and unexpected confessions, would push the story into territory that no one could have predicted. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Nick Reiner. The name was now on everyone's lips, plastered across headlines, whispered in newsrooms, and debated endlessly on social media. The 32-year-old son of Rob and Michelle Reiner had gone from a relatively private life in the shadows of Hollywood fame to the center of a murder investigation that gripped the nation. Understanding Nick. The choices he made, the tensions he was embroiled in, and the family dynamics surrounding him, is crucial to piecing together the events that led to that fateful night. From the outside, Nick appeared like any other young adult in a wealthy, high-profile family. He had opportunities many could only dream of, access to resources, and a lifestyle cushioned by his parents' success. Yet insiders painted a more complicated picture. There had been whispers of conflicts over money, lifestyle choices that clashed with his father's expectations, and repeated disagreements that, over time, created friction between him and other family members. To outsiders, these might have seemed trivial or ordinary, but within the family, they carried emotional weight. Nick's living arrangement was also significant. Residing in the guest house on the Brentwood estate placed him physically close to his parents, yet somewhat removed from the daily rhythm of family life. That separation, while seemingly convenient, may have contributed to underlying tensions. Isolation can magnify emotions, and small disagreements can feel larger when experienced in solitude. Those who knew him described Nick as intelligent but impulsive, capable of charm and manipulation, yet prone to decisions that caused conflict with those around him. Investigators began piecing together his life in the days and weeks before the murders. They looked at financial records, communications, social interactions, and behavioral patterns. The goal was to understand motive, opportunity, and potential premeditation. Every message sent, every phone call, every interaction was scrutinized for meaning, for evidence of planning or intent. To the public, this may have seemed invasive, but in a high-profile case, the stakes were extraordinary. Nick's behavior leading up to the tragedy raised eyebrows among those closest to him. Accounts described tensions escalating with his father, disputes over personal responsibility, and arguments about lifestyle choices that reflected deeper generational and familial conflicts. The nature of these arguments, previously private, became critical in understanding the emotional landscape that contributed to the events of that night. Was it merely teenage rebellion carried into adulthood, or were there deeper resentments festering beneath the surface? As authorities conducted their investigation, a clearer picture of Nick's environment began to emerge. The guest house, while separate, allowed him access to the main residence and, consequently, to his parents. Security footage and eyewitness reports indicated his movements throughout the property, highlighting a level of proximity that would be crucial in the legal analysis. Investigators sought to determine not only what he did, but also the timing, sequence, and potential intent behind each action. Beyond logistics, authorities also considered psychological factors. Family members noted patterns of behavior, moments of anger, frustration, or withdrawal, times when conflicts with Tracy or Romy escalated, and instances where Nick seemed at odds with the family's expectations. While no single factor could definitively explain the tragedy, the accumulation of these details painted a picture of a young man under intense pressure, caught in a web of personal, familial, and psychological stressors. The investigation was further complicated by the allegations made by Romy against Tracy. Suddenly, authorities were tasked not just with examining Nick's actions, but also considering the broader family dynamics. Every interaction, every dispute, every subtle tension had potential relevance. The narrative was no longer linear. It had become a complex tapestry of conflicting testimonies, emotional undercurrents, and psychological intrigue. Law enforcement approached the case with caution and thoroughness. Interviews with family members, friends, and acquaintances sought to establish character, motive, and context. Financial records were examined for discrepancies or disputes that might have triggered conflict. Behavioral patterns were scrutinized to detect any signs of premeditation or emotional instability. In every sense, Nick's life was placed under a microscope, the goal being to separate perception from reality and to establish a factual foundation for prosecution. Yet for all the scrutiny, questions remained. How much of Nick's behavior was misinterpreted by family members? To what extent were long-standing familial tensions influencing testimonies? Could stress, misunderstanding, or miscommunication have escalated into tragedy, or was there a more deliberate, sinister plan at play? These uncertainties fueled speculation, media narratives, and courtroom strategies, ensuring that the investigation remained both legally and emotionally complex. In public, the case became a study in perception versus reality. Nick, once a relatively private figure, was thrust into a spotlight that exposed every nuance of his life. Friends and acquaintances offered conflicting descriptions, some portraying him as troubled but innocent, others hinting at a darker, more calculated side. The media, eager for sensational details, amplified these narratives, creating a climate of tension and anticipation. As the investigation deepened, authorities also explored the relationships among the siblings. The interactions between Nick, Tracy, and Romy became central to understanding motive and opportunity. Patterns of conflict, loyalty, and rivalry were scrutinized for clues. How had these dynamics influenced Nick's state of mind? What role did the alleged disputes with his father play? And how did the siblings' perspectives, shaped by years of observation and experience, intersect with the objective facts of the case? Ultimately, the investigation revealed a complex web of behavior, family tension, and environmental factors. Nick's proximity to the tragedy, combined with long-standing familial dynamics and emotional stressors, created a multifaceted puzzle for authorities to solve. Every detail, from small disputes to major confrontations, became significant. And yet, despite the thoroughness of the investigation, uncertainties persisted, leaving the public and legal teams alike to grapple with questions that had no easy answers. The scrutiny would not end with the initial arrest. Courtroom testimonies, witness statements, and forensic analyses would continue to probe Nick's actions, motivations, and interactions. Each revelation, each contradiction, would add tension and drama to an already complex narrative, deepening the mystery and heightening the stakes. Because even as investigators dug deeper, even as the courtroom prepared for explosive confrontations, one truth became increasingly clear. In the Reiner family, nothing was as simple as it seemed. Every relationship, every conflict, every decision carried weight, and the events of that night were the culmination of years of unseen tension. The courtroom had become a stage, a theater of emotion where every glance, every gesture, and every word carried extraordinary weight. By now, the public had already witnessed tears, accusations, and shocking revelations. But as the trial progressed, the intensity of the proceedings escalated, creating a narrative that felt more like a dramatic thriller than a legal case. The stakes were enormous. The lives of the Reiner children, the truth about the murders of Rob and Michelle, and the unraveling of decades of family dynamics all hung in the balance. From the opening moments of the session, it was clear that this was no ordinary trial. Lawyers paced with urgency, cameras focused on every witness, and the gallery was packed with journalists and onlookers eager for every detail. Every statement delivered, every piece of evidence presented, contributed to an atmosphere so charged it could almost be felt in the seats of the courtroom. Even seasoned legal observers remarked on the palpable tension, noting that the case had already become a landmark example of high-profile family drama intersecting with violent crime. At the heart of the drama were the Reiner siblings. Tracy, still reeling from Romy's explosive accusations, struggled to maintain composure. Each question from opposing counsel seemed designed to test not only her recollection of events, but also her emotional fortitude. Her tears, previously a symbol of grief, were now interpreted as a potential indicator of guilt, confusion, or trauma, depending on who was observing. Romy, on the other hand, appeared almost unervingly calm, delivering her testimony with clarity, precision, and unwavering conviction. Her statements, especially her direct accusations toward Tracy, had already reshaped the narrative and put the family's private conflicts into the public eye. Nick Reiner's presence added another layer of complexity. Though not a direct witness at this stage, every detail of his behavior, interactions, and prior actions was dissected and presented in court. Attorneys for both sides meticulously analyzed his communications, movements on the night of the murders, and history of conflicts with family members. Witnesses were called to testify about patterns of tension, disputes, and emotional instability, all aimed at painting a portrait of motive and intent. For the jury and the public, these revelations created a sense of deepening intrigue. Could one individual truly have committed such a heinous act, or was there more at play within the family's tangled web of relationships? One of the most dramatic moments came during cross-examination. Tracy, confronted with Romy's accusations and a barrage of pointed questions, struggled to articulate her defense. Her voice cracked as she recounted her interactions with her parents, detailing arguments, reconciliations, and the often complicated dynamics that existed behind the family's polished public image. Each explanation seemed to both clarify and complicate the situation, revealing layers of family life that were both relatable and horrifying. The audience could almost feel the weight of decades of tension condensed into each exchange, each sentence a reflection of unresolved grievances and emotional fractures. Romy's testimony continued to dominate headlines. She provided detailed accounts of incidents that she claimed demonstrated her sister's duplicity, manipulation, or involvement in the events leading up to the tragedy. Every anecdote, no matter how small, was framed as evidence of a broader pattern of behavior. She painted a picture of a sister who was capable of deception and betrayal, while simultaneously emphasizing her own loyalty and commitment to the truth. This combination of personal insight and moral imperative made her testimony compelling, even as it created explosive controversy. The public and media reaction to these courtroom exchanges was immediate and intense. Every network, website, and social media platform dissected the testimony, replayed moments of breakdown and accusation, and speculated about the implications for the case. Viewers were drawn into the drama not only by the shocking nature of the allegations, but also by the human emotions on display: fear, anger, grief, and the complex interplay of loyalty and suspicion. It was, in essence, a real-life thriller, unfolding in real time for a captivated audience. Throughout the trial, lawyers skillfully leveraged the emotional intensity to advance their arguments. Defense attorneys highlighted inconsistencies in witness accounts, emphasized the potential for misunderstanding or misperception, and sought to humanize Tracy while challenging Romy's credibility. Prosecutors, conversely, underscored patterns of behavior, the consistency of Romy's observations, and the significance of family conflicts as possible motivation. Each exchange added suspense, nuance, and drama, ensuring that the courtroom remained a theater of intrigue and psychological tension. Beyond the immediate testimonies, the case began to reveal deeper psychological and emotional insights into the Reiner family. Experts in family dynamics, forensic psychology, and trauma were called to provide context, explaining how long-standing resentments, sibling rivalry, and unresolved conflicts could escalate under extreme circumstances. These analyses illuminated not just what happened on the night of the murders, but why the family was vulnerable to such a catastrophic event in the first place. The courtroom drama reached new heights as cross-examinations, emotional testimonies, and unexpected revelations continued to emerge. Each witness, each detail, each accusation added a layer of complexity that kept the jury, and the public, on edge. It became clear that this trial was about more than determining guilt or innocence. It was about uncovering the hidden truths of a family, exposing secrets that had long been buried, and confronting the devastating consequences of unresolved tension, jealousy, and betrayal. And just when it seemed that the narrative could not become any more charged, a surprise piece of evidence was introduced, a revelation that contradicted prior testimonies, cast doubt on previously accepted facts, and sent shockwaves through the courtroom. It was a moment that would redefine the trajectory of the trial, forcing everyone involved to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the Reiner family, the events of that night, and the motivations behind them. Because what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Evidence is the backbone of any trial. It is the framework upon which truth is built, or at least, the version of truth that a court is tasked with determining. In the Reiner case, the evidence was more than mere facts. It was a window into the hidden tensions, secret behaviors, and shocking possibilities that had defined the family's life. Each piece told a story, revealed a motive, or cast doubt, and together, they began to paint a portrait of tragedy that was far more intricate than anyone outside the family could have imagined. The first and most immediate piece of evidence came from the scene itself. Forensic investigators meticulously documented the Brentwood estate, analyzing every detail: the positions of the bodies, the nature of the injuries, the location of personal items, and even the smallest traces of DNA. The medical examiner's report confirmed that Rob and Michelle Reiner had suffered multiple sharp force injuries, consistent with a violent and deliberate attack. While the official cause of death was straightforward, the context, the dynamics within the home, the timing of events, and the presence of family members created questions that were far more complex. Security footage from the estate provided another critical layer. Cameras captured movements around the property, showing who entered and exited the main house, the guest house, and surrounding areas. Analysts pored over these recordings, noting patterns, discrepancies, and moments of interest. While the footage did not provide a complete account of the events, it offered insight into timing, opportunity, and potential interactions among family members. Every frame was scrutinized for detail: a glance, a hesitation, a path taken that could indicate intent. Financial records added yet another dimension to the investigation. Accounts, transfers, and statements were examined for irregularities, disputes, or motivations tied to money. In high-profile families like the Reiners, financial matters often intersect with personal relationships, creating friction that can escalate into conflict. Investigators explored questions such as, were there unresolved financial disagreements? Were there assets at stake that could have influenced behavior? Did money exacerbate existing tensions? Each discovery revealed both the practical and psychological factors at play. Communications, text messages, emails, and phone records became pivotal pieces of evidence. Investigators examined exchanges among Nick, Tracy, Romy, and even their parents to reconstruct conversations, identify patterns, and uncover potential disputes. In many cases, these communications revealed subtle tensions, arguments about responsibility, veiled threats, or attempts at reconciliation. In others, they highlighted contradictions between what family members claimed in court and what they had expressed privately. These messages, seemingly mundane, were now scrutinized for hidden meaning, intent, and emotional subtext. Witness testimonies further expanded the evidentiary landscape. Neighbors, friends, staff, and acquaintances provided accounts that offered insight into the family's day-to-day interactions, behavioral patterns, and social dynamics. Some testified to witnessing arguments or hearing heated discussions. Others described patterns of closeness, loyalty, and cooperation. Taken together, these observations created a complex mosaic, sometimes contradictory, often nuanced, that investigators and attorneys had to navigate carefully.